November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving. A man in a business suit buys a ticket under the name Dan Cooper. He boards Northwest Orient Flight 305 in Portland, heading to Seattle. 30 minutes later, he hands the flight attendant a note. It reads, "I have a bomb." Within hours, he would parachute into the night with $200,000 in ransom money. He was never seen again. This is the only unsolved case of air piracy in American history. This is the legend of D.B. Cooper. Welcome to my channel. I'm your guide through history's most perplexing mysteries. Today, we're investigating a hijacking that captivated America and spawned thousands of theories, dozens of suspects, and exactly 0 answers. The FBI spent 45 years on this case before officially closing it in 2016. But closing a case doesn't mean solving it. Who was D.B. Cooper? Did he survive the jump? Where is the money? After 5 decades, these questions still haunt investigators and amateur sleuths alike. It was a rainy Wednesday evening. Flight 305, a Boeing 727, had only 36 passengers aboard, far from full for the Thanksgiving travel season. Among them sat a man in his mid-40s, wearing a black business suit, white shirt, black tie, and sunglasses. He carried a briefcase and a paper bag. Nothing about him stood out. He was completely unremarkable, exactly the kind of person you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing. Shortly after takeoff, the man handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She initially thought it was just another passenger trying to flirt, something flight attendants dealt with constantly. She tucked it in her pocket without reading it. But the man leaned forward and said quietly, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner opened the note. Written in neat, all-capital letters, it said, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." Her hands trembling, Schaffner sat down next to him. He opened his briefcase slightly, just enough for her to glimpse red cylinders, wires, and a battery. It looked exactly like what she imagined a bomb would look like. He told her his demands: $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft. The note also specified the money should be in a knapsack. When Schaffner asked to write down the demands, he calmly dictated them. She took the note to the cockpit. Captain William Scott immediately radioed air traffic control. The FBI was alerted, and one of the strangest negotiations in aviation history began. During the 90-minute flight to Seattle, the hijacker remained calm and polite. He even ordered a bourbon and soda, paying for it with a $20 bill. He declined Schaffner's offer of a complimentary drink. "No, thank you," he said. "I don't want to take advantage. A hijacker with manners." At 5:39 p.m., Flight 305 landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. The tower instructed Captain Scott to taxi to a remote, isolated section of the tarmac. The hijacker allowed all 36 passengers to disembark once the ransom was delivered. Most had no idea they'd been on a hijacked plane. They thought it was a simple mechanical delay. The FBI had moved quickly. They gathered exactly what he demanded: $200,000 in used $20 bills, each one photographed and the serial numbers recorded. The bills weighed about 21 pounds. They also provided 4 parachutes, 2 main chutes and 2 reserve chutes. Why 4? The FBI's thinking was clever. If he demanded multiple parachutes, he might take hostages with him. So they made sure all parachutes were functional. They couldn't risk giving him a sabotage chute if he might force someone else to wear it. A Northwest Orient operations manager brought the money and parachutes aboard. The hijacker carefully inspected everything. He seemed satisfied. Then he made his next demand: refuel the aircraft and file a flight plan to Mexico City, with a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. But there were specific conditions. The plane must fly at minimum speed, around 100 knots. The gear must remain down, the wing flaps set at 15 degrees. The cabin must remain unpressurized, and the rear stairs must stay unlocked. Captain Scott knew immediately what these specifications meant. This man was planning to jump. The hijacker released the flight attendants, except for one, Tina Mucklow. Then he changed his mind and released her too. Now only the flight crew remained, locked in the cockpit per his instructions. At 7:40 p.m., with the plane refueled and flight plan filed, Northwest Orient Flight 305 took off again, heading south into the darkness. From the cockpit, the crew tried to communicate with him over the intercom. No response. Around 8 p.m., a red light illuminated on the instrument panel. The stairs had been deployed. The plane's tail dipped slightly. At approximately 8:13 p.m., the crew felt a sudden upward movement. Something heavy had left the plane. When they landed in Reno and cautiously opened the cockpit door, the passenger cabin was empty. 2 parachutes remained. The bomb, later determined to be fake, was left behind. And D.B. Cooper had vanished into the November night somewhere over southwestern Washington. The largest manhunt in FBI history immediately began. But where do you search? The plane had been flying over the Cascade Mountains in complete darkness during a rainstorm. The temperature at jumping altitude was 7 degrees below zero. The wind speed was 200 miles per hour. He had jumped in a business suit, wearing only loafers. No boots, no helmet, no jumpsuit, no gloves. Most experienced skydivers thought the jump was suicidal. The 727's rear stairs, when deployed in flight, create tremendous turbulence. Jumpers risk being slammed into the tail section. The rain would feel like needles at that speed. And landing in the dense forest in darkness? Nearly impossible to survive. Yet, no body was ever found. Search parties combed the wilderness for weeks. The FBI interviewed everyone who knew anything about skydiving in the Pacific Northwest. They analyzed the flight data to calculate his likely landing zone. Nothing. No parachute. No body. No D.B. Cooper. The FBI developed over 800 suspects over the years. Each one was eventually ruled out. Some came close. Richard Floyd McCoy hijacked a plane just 5 months later using almost the identical method. He even looked similar to the composite sketch, but McCoy had been in Las Vegas the night of the Cooper hijacking, confirmed by multiple witnesses. He was killed in a shootout with FBI agents in 1974. Another strong suspect was Kenneth Christensen, a former paratrooper and Northwest Orient employee who bought a house with cash shortly after the hijacking, but DNA evidence didn't match. Then there was Robert Rackstraw, a former Special Forces member with extensive parachute training and a criminal record. The FBI looked at him seriously, but again, nothing conclusive. In 1980, 9 years after the hijacking, 8-year-old Brian Ingram was digging in the sand along the Columbia River when he found 3 packets of decaying $20 bills. The serial numbers matched. $5,800 of the ransom had washed ashore. But how did it get there? The Columbia River was nowhere near the suspected flight path. Did Cooper land in water and drown? Did he bury the money? The discovery raised more questions than it answered. The FBI's profile of D.B. Cooper, based on witness descriptions and evidence, painted a fascinating picture. He knew aircraft. His specific demands about airspeed, flap settings, and the unpressurized cabin showed technical knowledge. He knew the 727 had rear stairs that could be deployed in flight, a feature unique to that model. Was he a pilot? An aerospace engineer? Military? He was familiar with the Pacific Northwest. He seemed to know the terrain, the weather patterns, and where he wanted to jump. He also knew parachutes. He rejected 2 of the 4 provided because they were training chutes. He took the 2 functional ones, even using one to secure the money bag. The flight attendants described him as calm, polite, even courteous. No anger, no threats beyond what was necessary. He spoke softly and thanked people. When a flight attendant offered him dinner, he said, "No thanks, I'm not hungry." This wasn't a desperate man. This was someone executing a carefully planned operation. But the FBI also noted odd details. When given the parachutes, he didn't test them thoroughly. An experienced jumper would have. The money bag he created was crude and would be nearly impossible to control in freefall. And his choice of exit location over the Cascade Mountains in a storm suggested either incredible confidence or complete recklessness. The name Dan Cooper came from the ticket, but news reporters mistakenly called him D.B. Cooper, and the name stuck. Was Dan Cooper his real name? Absolutely not. No one matching that name and description was ever found. It was surely an alias. One intriguing detail, he left behind a tie clip with tiny particles of pure titanium and other rare earth elements. These materials were used in aerospace and chemical industries in the 1970s. Was this a clue to his profession? Possibly. But it was never enough to identify him. After 45 years, the FBI officially closed the case in 2016, citing the need to redirect resources. But they left the door open. Quote, "Should any physical evidence emerge, we'll be ready," they stated. This is the ultimate question. Most experts say no. The odds were stacked impossibly against him. He jumped at 10,000 feet into freezing rain and complete darkness. He wore street clothes and loafers. He had no helmet, no gloves, no proper gear. The force below was dense, unforgiving wilderness. Even if he survived the landing, he'd be in the middle of nowhere in November, soaking wet, possibly injured, with 21 pounds of cash. Hypothermia would set in within minutes. The nearest town was miles away through treacherous terrain. Even experienced survivalists would struggle. And this was a middle-aged man in a business suit. But then there's the money. Only $5,800 was ever found, and that was miles from the suspected drop zone. What happened to the rest? If Cooper died in the forest, wouldn't hikers have eventually found the money? That part of Washington isn't completely remote. Thousands of people hike there. Someone should have found something. A parachute, clothing, skeletal remains, the other $194,200? Unless he survived. Unless he walked out of those woods, dried the bills, and slowly spent them over the years. It would explain why the money never surfaced. He'd be too smart to deposit it in banks or spend it in traceable ways. Small purchases, cash only, never suspicious amounts. Some believe he had help. Maybe someone waited for him on a road. Maybe he had a stash of warm clothes and supplies. Maybe it wasn't a desperate escape, but a brilliantly planned operation with backup plans. Or maybe he's buried under decades of forest debris, along with $194,200 in rotting bills, and we'll never know. Nature has a way of keeping secrets. The forest might have claimed D.B. Cooper that very night, just minutes after his jump. D.B. Cooper pulled off the only unsolved case of air piracy in American history. He outsmarted the FBI, airlines, and every investigator who's chased his shadow for over 50 years. He became a folk hero, an anti-establishment figure who beat the system. Songs were written about him, movies made. Every year, enthusiasts gather in Washington to celebrate D.B. Cooper Day. But behind the legend is a real mystery. A man who carefully planned an incredible crime and then vanished into the Pacific Northwest wilderness. Dead or alive, we may never know. The forest keeps its secrets well. If D.B. Cooper survived, he'd be in his late 90s now. Maybe he's watching videos like this, smiling at theories about his identity. Or maybe his bones lie somewhere under the evergreens, guardian of the greatest unsolved mystery in aviation history. What do you think? Did he survive? Share your theories below and subscribe for more mysteries that refuse to be solved. Tomorrow, we're investigating a haunted location where visitors report encounters so terrifying, many refuse to return. You won't want to miss it. Stay curious, stay safe, and maybe don't hijack any planes.